erotic. Okay, what's up? I bet that got recorded. This is Pete from Comic Books Transformed, and my laughing buddy over there is Mr. Brian Coors Hair. We discuss comic books that have been adapted into TV streaming shows and movies. So for today, we are talking about an episode which I've already said is the best thing that Disney Plus has put out ever.
100%.
It is something that Brian, after he finished watching it, was like, can we just talk about this right now? And I really wish we could have. We are talking about X-Men 97, episode number 5, Remember It. So,
this episode is taking the internet by storm. I cannot go anywhere without seeing clips or people talking about it, and it's great to see.
Yeah, it is great to see. It kind of transcends everything that Marvel's put out so far in the MCU.
There's just been that kind of fan blowback about the quality of the MCU lately, and this is kind of turning it around here. We've had a couple solid things in a row here. We had Loki, which we both really enjoyed. I think The Marvels was actually underrated and was pretty decent, and then we have this, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
I was so excited. This was the thing I was most excited for when they announced Disney Plus, or when they said it pretty early on in the creation of the service.
Yeah.
And I remember our friend Danny saying it's not enough or anything like that. I'm like, X-Men for me is enough. Like if the one thing they do good is X-Men, all the money I'm paying for this is enough.
Yes.
And I feel redeemed that this is amazing, and this episode was just fantastic.
Yeah. I think the reason why it's gotten you and me so much is because we grew up on the X-Men cartoon. We have been reading X-Men for years and years. I actually calculated how much I've been reading X-Men. I've been reading it for 28 years of my 41 years of life. You're probably just up there with me.
Yeah.
And then some of the stuff that we have been the most excited to talk about in the comics, I don't think we could ever imagine them being adapted into film or being in a show. And then somehow they've put them into this cartoon that we loved. It has some of the voices of the people that we loved. And this episode kind of goes beyond both and has this sort of operatic, epic moment. It's crazy.
Yeah. So one of the things that the old show excelled at was kind of remixing classic comic stories and kind of fitting in some characters that weren't there previously, and making it interesting and making them seem like they fit there. And part of this episode is from a comic, the arc E is for Extinction by Grant Morrison, New X-Men, which is basically the thing that you got me back into comics with. That and Ultimate X-Men is what sold me on being a regular weekly comic reader again.
Yes.
And it's amazing to see all that, to see that adapted and still be sort of remixed, like I said, there with other characters, and then making it so good and it fits perfectly like a glove in there.
Yep. Yeah, it is so good. Not only does it have E is for Extinction in there, but it also has little shades of Krakoa in there,
yes.
Like the Krakoan era, which is something that we love. So I feel like when we talk about stuff like this, people always kind of reference the Chris Claremont stuff, which is that's the source. That's the thing that everyone loves about X-Men. It all kind of comes from that, right?
Yep.
But that is where my blind eye is. I know about all that stuff. I actually wrote down where I came into X-Men. It was Uncanny X-Men. I believe it was 291, and it was, or maybe I'm getting the dates wrong, but it's from 1991, and it's this issue with Colossus where he's taken over by the Shadow King. And then I basically read it from 1992 to 1997. Then you and I got back into it in 2001. So that's where the 28 years comes from. And I feel like the X-Men, besides Transformers for you, that's our thing where we fucking love the X-Men so much.
Yeah.
Even more than Batman, I would say too.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So when they went to Genosha, it's just Cameo City. You want to just kind of list off some of the cameos?
Oh
that
my
are in
God, so many cameos. So yeah, they show one of my favorite things here is they show characters from all different ages, like characters that weren't even created for 10, 15 years past where this takes place. I love that.
Yes.
So you see some Morlocks, you see Leech and the Morlocks there with a bunch of little kids running around. We see Pixie there. I still haven't figured out who that girl with the parrot was.
Yeah.
One person I can't figure out. And then who else was with them there?
Blob Herman.
Blob Herman.
Blob Herman.
Blob Herman from created in that whole new X-Men story arc there. One of the newer students there, along with like Beak and Quentin Quire, all those characters.
Yes.
So and then of course we have returning major characters like Nightcrawler, and then we have this whole crazy scene. Oh no, wait! First there's like a weird dance scene, to the tune of Ace of Base.
Yeah,
which is such an interesting thing, but like they like fought to get that song, which was interesting. But yeah, we see multiple man. We see Exodus. Who else was there? And
Boom Boom's there. You said that
Archangel flies around. And there's a bunch of characters I didn't even really know, like Cypher, not Doug Ramsey Cypher, but another Cypher who I didn't know. I didn't know that one. And then we get to the I'm going to say Krakoan Council, the Genosian Council, which to me is a nod to the Quiet Council of the Krakoan era that's kind of ending now in the comics. So there we see a lot of major characters there. I get a little nervous when I saw Moira McTaggart there.
I know, ditto. Yes.
Yeah, and if you've read any of the newer Krakoan stuff in the last 4 or 5 years, you'd understand why. But yeah, we have Sebastian Shaw, the White Queen. We have Banshee. We have Moira McTaggart. Who else was there? Callisto from the Morlocks.
Yeah.
And Madeline Pryor's there. She was kind of invited to be like as a X-Men member representative on this council.
Yes. I watched this episode twice because
I did too.
I loved it so much, and I don't think I've ever watched any Disney Plus thing twice. I've watched MCU movies twice or even more, but I find myself not wanting to go back for any of the Phase 4, Phase 5 stuff. I'm like, I don't feel like watching that. This, I was like, I want to watch this again.
Yeah.
When you go back, you realize how jam-packed this episode is, because another person that's in that Quiet Council scene that you just mentioned is Valerie Cooper. Like she's brought involved. She's on Genosha too. But like you have the Quiet Council and they're acting. I mean, I keep saying the Quiet Council. They call them like the interim council or whatever. But they are essentially like the Quiet Council on Krakoa. They decide to elect Magneto as the leader of Genosha, which he was during the E is for Extinction event. And all this stuff is going on. You forget that this show actually opens up with like a news report at the X Mansion, right? Yeah. And there's stuff there too that it's interesting details, but the highs are so big that you forget that there's these other interesting details.
Yeah, there's some deep stuff going there. I'll let you continue there.
No, well, I think the thing that got us excited too is once again another reference to Grant Morrison's work is that Cyclops is caught mentally cheating like he is in New X-Men, but it's actually with Madeline Pryor. Madeline Pryor is sitting on that council. She kind of wakes up from a daydream because she was with Cyclops and Jean Grey discovers them. And in the comics, it was Emma Frost and Cyclops.
It was Emma, yeah. In the comics, Cyclops and Jean were kind of going through a rough patch, and then I believe Emma was even like in like a Phoenix costume.
Yes, she had like red hair, I think, too, at one point.
And then you find out later on, but it was interesting to see because you didn't realize it at first because Madeline and Jean looked exactly the same. So I didn't. I mean, maybe the haircut kind of gives it away, but I was surprised to see that Jean walk in and saying like get out of this is our thing. This is our psychic report was our thing. So
yeah, it's weird because like they use the hair to just make it distinguish between the two. Like they have it that Madeline has long hair and that Jean has her hair in a ponytail. When Jean does show up to like break up their little session in the astral plane, she has long hair, so it's kind of like it throws you off. Then when you go outside, Jean is like making the lake outside of the school rise up, kind of like Moana or something, or Moses with the Red
Yeah,
Sea.
I was gonna say Moses. Yeah,
Yeah. And she's got these orbs that are kind of showing her flashes of her memory. And then she's got her hair in the ponytail once again at that point. And then Madeline has her hair in a ponytail too when she's at Genosha. But I was going to say that sequence with Jean where she is, by the water, Wolverine comes and sees her, and it kind of made me realize that, like, we're 5 episodes in, and Wolverine really hasn't had a big moment in this show.
I mean, he had some action beats in that first episode, I think. But yes, I believe that was one of the directives of the showrunner, Bo DeMaio, however you want to pronounce it.
DeMaio, right?
DeMaio, yeah.
Bo DeMaio,
is that he wanted to show people that everything doesn't have to be about Wolverine. At the time of this, I mean, and we both love Wolverine.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
At the time of the original show, he was like the big thing. That was the big interesting. That was the big draw for X-Men was Wolverine.
Yes,
for many, many years, to the point where he was started being on like every single team, even though it was kind of impossible. But here, he's often left behind. Whatever mission is going on, he's left behind. Like the second episode, he's left behind in the mansion, and when Jean's about to have the baby, and and here everyone else is going off to do something here, and then he's still there as well.
Right. Yeah, and so I'm really glad that they had that idea because the old show was just filled with Wolverine stuff. There's always these like Wolverine solo series, and stories or whatever. But then this episode primarily focuses on Rogue and Gambit and Magneto and this love triangle that is formed in this season. Yeah. Now, with this, they allude to the idea that like Rogue was actually with Magneto at one point before the show even began.
Yeah, and again, this is a nice little kind of remix of content here. So I love that they show when Rogue started off as evil and she's kind of influenced by her mother, and she even had that full green bodysuit costume that she had earlier on. Yeah. And they kind of interject that with when she meets Magneto, which is kind of replicating when they kind of had a little fling sort of in the Savage Land in the comics in the late 80s. And the costume reflects that. Like, I mean, she's a bit more scantily clad in the comic, I believe, but that's
I'm sure.
But they kind of reference that time and mix that in with her being a villain in her early days as a villain instead.
Yeah, they show like Mystique when she looks like that regular woman, and that's like on the show they showed Mystique like that too, like in the old 90s cartoon. And it's a retcon, it's basically saying that like they knew each other. They basically work it in by saying that like Magneto treated it like it's going to be as if this never happened or you never knew me, and then Rogue's like, I felt that way too. And so that's the way they kind of
it's a retcon, but it's done in a way that I don't mind.
Yeah, ditto. And so we have this sequence that you called it the Not Hellfire Gala. I love that. Gambit's all dressed up. They're going to go to this like dance, this ball or whatever in Genosha, and Rogue has to make this decision of is she going to go with Magneto or is she going to go with Gambit? She makes Gambit.
Wait, hold on. We forgot to mention a really important detail here is that Magneto's condition for leading Genosha was that he can also have Rogue rule alongside him.
Yes.
So that's a really important distinction to make here. And then we have a scene where Rogue comes and talks to Gambit about the past, telling him that, and then about basically this offer that she's received.
Yes. Okay. I'm really glad you brought that up. Yeah. Because he's basically like, I'm the strongest advocate or the most vocal advocate for mutant rights. And then I have someone who's like, your power is all about empathy. And he said that you would make this great like queen or whatever of Genosha. And so, Gambit basically says they're going to be friends. I mean, there's just great, I don't want to say cinematography, but the way that the shots are set up is just like interesting to begin with. Like she's talking to Gambit and he's just throwing playing cards into a fire. You're watching the playing cards burn. It's much more like cinematic and interesting just in general.
I agree. Yeah. And this is a very, very drama filled scene.
Yeah. So he basically says they're just going to be friends. He goes to the bar. He talks to Madeline for a little bit, and then Rogue shows up. the music cue when Rogue shows up is great. It's straight out of a movie. It kind of reminds me of when like Michelle Pfeiffer shows up at the masked party in Batman Returns. She kind of makes this big entrance, and everyone's looking at Rogue. She like flies in, but that's actually after what I would say is my favorite part of this episode. And there's epic things, there's amazing things in this episode, but I love this one part where Magneto's talking to Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, and then Valerie Cooper comes up, and she says something like, "Oh, it's crazy for citizens of a nation to elect a terrorist as their leader." And then Magneto, he doesn't look at her; he just like drinks champagne. He's not even making eye contact with her, and he says like, "But some nations allow their leaders to be terrorists, right?" And I love
that's
that.
Going to be fantastic line, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a great fucking line, but it like there's that mutant superiority that like Magneto has, Sebastian Shaw has, Emma Frost has, and it just like captures that so perfectly. I love that scene.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We should also mention too that speaking of mutant superiority, back in the States, Cyclops is being interviewed, and he goes on a little tangent there.
Yes.
And I certainly got some schism vibes from that speech there.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. They're definitely setting up like Cyclops as a villain in that.
I hope they don't make him go full villain. I don't think it should be like that. I think maybe they will take him a little more of a heroic angle here.
Yeah.
But again, like they're remixing all these things. So these events happen so far apart in terms of real years, and now they're happening at the same time. So we may get slightly different angles for these characters and their motivations.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, these things, like some of them are like decades apart. That's how long.
Yeah.
So
especially it's always interesting with Magneto because he's gone back and forth between villain so far that and hero so many times. I always especially think about kind of the ending of the Grant Morrison run, and like he's like flat out evil in that, but they retcon it essentially saying it wasn't him.
Yeah, it was like Zorn or something. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing there. But like at the time reading that, I'm like, this is amazing. But they couldn't just get rid of the character of Magneto, so they had to kind of retcon it.
Right, yeah, and that who knows if we're going to see that on the show. I mean, there's so many different paths, and we can kind of talk after the event that happens. What's interesting, like, because I don't know what the fuck is going on, honestly. Like, you have Cable in this show, and he's voiced by the guy that voiced Gambit in the original series, Chris Potter.
Yeah,
I felt like he really made Cable sound like, what's his face, Josh Brolin.
Yeah, I can hear that. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have many lines so far. Really, just the one thing there, and I also really appreciated that the scene he is in, they kind of foreshadowed both in this episode and in the third episode. There's a scene where I guess it was Madeline, or I don't remember if it was Madeline or Jean, but they see that vision of the future there, and then it's literally this. Like you never would have expected they would have done this soon. That was like the biggest shock to me that they did something like this soon in this series.
And what sucks about that, Brian, is that I got a YouTube notification saying like, here's a video, and it's from a YouTuber, and it had the fucking Wild Sentinels 3 heads on it. I was like, yeah. I was like, wow, they're doing this. Okay. But still, even though that was spoiled for me, I was still blown away at like how epic they made this.
Yeah, this I mean the fight scenes in this have been pretty great, pretty inventive, and I think they continue that here, and this is pretty incredible. The Wild Sentinel attacks, and we're kind of all wondering if these people are dead. Like a lot of these characters may just be dead. I did see on Twitter that Bo DeMaio said that somebody specifically asked about Moira, and they said she was dead, and she was one of the characters they showed kind of like laying on that rooftop in the gardens.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of characters there.
Oh, there was. Sebastian Shaw was
there. Shaw was there, yeah.
She was there. Madeline Pryor was there.
Madeline Pryor, yeah. So they're essentially saying that, so they said Madeline was dead. He said Madeline was dead and Moira was dead. So we know that he's not currently on the show anymore, and we can take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. And then also we're talking about comics. So, everybody can die and come back in comics.
Right. And that's actually a big part of the Krakoan era, which is like, because there are major deaths in this one, and I feel like we will actually see those characters again if we get some kind of version of the Krakoan era at some point.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll get to that too. Like, one thing I want to say was Cable shows up and he says he's coming. Now, I have a ticker that goes across the bottom that says, "Did Cassandra Nova send the Wild Sentinel?" But I'm not going to put that up there because you sent me an article where the director of the episode said that people shouldn't expect to see Cassandra Nova.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to do that. So we know that this show likes to make little alterations in the opening theme to kind of show you what may happen, almost like the previously on scenes that you used to see in the old episodes.
Yeah.
And this is when we see Cable and Apocalypse. So, I mean, when I watched the episode, my first thing I thought was Cassandra Nova. But then I also thought Apocalypse. And then I also remembered that they said that Mr. Sinister was kind of like the big bad of this season. And we saw him in the second or the third episode, and he's kind of gone already, sort of.
Right.
And I wondered if that was meant to be like a red herring to hide with the actual intentions and the real villain of this whole season, or if he is still going to be able to come back here.
Yeah, honestly, if it was Mr. Sinister that was somehow behind this, I feel like I would be disappointed. I actually think it would kind of make more sense if it was Apocalypse. One thing that's really bothering me is that Bishop is the one that took Cable into the future, and I'm really hoping that like Cable's future that's like much further in the future than Bishop's, and with much more advanced technology and with Apocalypse and stuff, I'm hoping that's intact versus like him being kind of connected to the Bishop type future, Yeah,
I agree. Well, I mean, it seems to me here that Cable looked exactly the same as he did in the old series. So I'm imagining that is still the same. Everything still happens as it did back then.
Okay. Yeah, and watching it on a second time around, I was able to kind of pay a little closer attention to like the little flashes that Madeline gets when Cable shows up, because she basically has the same thing as Jean, where like that little blue light pops over her head, but she has visions. Jean doesn't have visions, and in her visions she sees like a rat, and I can't remember what the fuck else I think she sees the Sentinel too. And she sees like one other thing, but I remember there was like a rat, and I was like, "What the fuck is this rat about?"
Yeah, maybe it's just symbolism, and maybe there's some traitor somewhere. Like there was that big story in the early X-Men shows where with Bishop actually, where they said one of the X-Men killed
Gambit.
They thought that. Well, everyone assumed it was Gambit, and he didn't make it easy on anybody by being rebellious and all that.
Yeah,
but, they thought God, what was the character's name? The senator.
Oh, Senator Kelly.
Senator Kelly, yeah. But it was Mystique all along.
Oh, Mystique. Well, so I mean, the rat. I mean, could even have like, it could be a reference to Mr. Sinister too, because it could be like his lab. He's got this kind of like gothic aesthetic to his lab, and she was in his lab. I don't know, but that's.
I don't want to rule out Val here. I feel like every time Val's here, something bad happens.
Oh no! Well, okay. So let's jump ahead then for a second. They do have this sort of like mid-season commercial where they show mostly the stuff we've already seen, but then there's little glimpses of stuff. And there's a part where like either Bolivar Trask already said this in a previous episode, or he's going to say it, but he says something like, "Oh, you mutants are all holding hands, and meanwhile we're setting up all the dominoes," or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? He says like we're setting up the pieces. Yeah. So it could literally be that just humans just sent the fucking Sentinel.
Yeah, and that was my other option before that I forgot to mention was actually Orchis, which is a kind of something from this Krakoan era that's going on in the comics now.
I kind of would like it if it was like a proto Orchis, like it's not the actual Orchis.
Yeah, just like it's not Hellfire, it's not Orchis.
Yeah. And I mean, and then there's all kinds of shit too. Oh man, you know what's so funny, Brian, is that like I've actually thought about this conversation multiple times and what we're going to talk about, but it's like there's so much to talk about. We just start spiraling all over the fucking place.
We're jumping around quite a bit.
It's like trying to fill up like a glass of water with like a hose, but it's on full blast. It's just spraying everywhere. Because like if we go with the time travel stuff with the Bishop, the Cable stuff, then you could have things like Nimrod too, and he's connected to Orchis. and then you could have Bastion, because isn't one of the titles of an upcoming episode similar to Zero Tolerance? Right? Is it
Tolerance is Extinction?
Tolerance is Extinction, right?
That's the 3-part finale. So essentially, we have 2 more episodes and then a 3-part finale.
Yeah. So like Bastion is a guy that I think he's from the future. He looks like a human, and he's like a sentinel. I think he's like part Nimrod, and that could be the threat.
Yeah, it's possible, but I mean, I just want to. I was talking about I was praising the weekly model before when we were reviewing Fallout, and this mentioning the show as well. But I just want to see the whole thing now, man. I just want to know.
Yeah, just fucking shoot it right to my eyes. Well, dude, why don't we get right to the fucking money shot then, right here?
Yeah,
and let's talk about the deaths and the epic conclusion.
Yeah. So yeah, we see a bunch of people get vaporized, including Banshee, and who's flying with Marrow. We see Val Cooper running with a bunch of people, and then the X-Men kind of come back into it. The X-Men that are there, Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit, they kind of come to, and their plan is to go save the Morlocks, who are kind of in a bunker underneath where the Wild Sentinel is. So Magneto is distracting the Sentinel. One of my favorite shots was he took that like bullet train and just like threw it like a spear at the thing, which was an awesome visual.
Yes.
And then Rogue and Gambit go to kind of free the Morlocks, which I think was a nice nod, because I think I don't remember, was it the show or the comic? Gambit had something to do with something bad that happened to the Morlocks. Like, did he accidentally like let the Reavers know where he was? I don't remember if that's the comics or the show, but
it was the Marauders, right?
Marauders, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think there's some nice redemption there with Gambit saving the Morlocks here.
Yeah.
And then at that point, there was a nice little conversation there between Leech and that Rainbow lady, who has a very interesting, a very plain name that I don't remember. It doesn't sound like or look or anything related to her powers.
Is it like a red?
No, I don't remember what it is.
So he's talking to her, and he says something like, he says like the X-Men or Magneto is going to save us, and then she says something like, X-Men don't care about Morlocks.
Yeah, the X-Men don't care about us. And then that's a nice little setup for it. Is a point where Magneto is protecting some of the Morlocks there from a blast from the Wild Sentinel, and he says in German to Leech, like, so I forget what it was, but
he says, "Don't be afraid."
Don't be afraid. Yes. And I saw someone mention a like there's like I guess it's a trope or something like that, is that in stressful, dire situations, people revert to their native language to kind of convey their thoughts.
Yes.
But then that was a nice little touch there, and I do think Magneto is probably dead here.
Okay, I understand why you would think that, but I think there's significance with Leech being right next to him. The Omega Sentinel says, or not the Omega, the Wild Sentinel says, Omega threat level detected. He blasts Magneto. He says, Omega threat level destroyed or eliminated or whatever. And when it says that, it's like Leech can steal your powers.
Yeah.
So it's like,
well, he nullifies your power. So maybe you're right. That's actually an excellent point.
Yeah, but and we'll see what happens. Magneto's definitely not gone from the show. He's either going to come back Krakoan style, or he's going to come back because like Leech died instead. And that could be one of two ways. It could be that like Leech nobly saves his life and he's like just barely struggling on like life support, or that like he in a rage actually kind of like let Leech get destroyed so he could come back and get his revenge. That would be kind of that more evil Magneto from the end of Grant Morrison.
I don't think they're going to go that route with making me. I think he's going to go on a violent rampage after this, but I don't think he would. He wouldn't sacrifice a mutant to do that.
Beautiful.
I don't think.
Beautiful. Well put. Yeah. So, like with that whole sequence, right? Because that sequence is incredible, but then the ending even tops it. I have to point out that like, this show it transcends the old cartoon. Like it's just better. When the Wild Sentinel attacks, they show like little flashes because it's like chaos. There's like little bursts of like people screaming and stuff like that. and it goes to black, and then people screaming in black. It's like in a movie, like a horror movie, or like Saving Private Ryan or something, right?
Yeah.
And then when Magneto gets the train and stuff, and he's just like hitting the Sentinel, and he gets knocked back, and he's like just on the ground, like wincing, like he's in Dragon Ball Z, and he's in pain. You see a fucking flash of like a concentration camp.
Yes.
Yes. You know, it's just like it's like so well made. And then he says that line in German and he just gets blasted. And then fucking Rogue goes to hit the Sentinel and Gambit charges up the bike and hits Rogue. It's just so fucking good.
Yeah, I love how inventive they've gotten with the power sets of everybody here. We initially saw it in that first episode that Gambit fucking charges Wolverine's claws, which was a really great foreshadowing to this, I think.
Right. Yes.
Just showing the different uses of his powers, and he's not just throwing cards. I mean, he would charge other things in the cartoon, but like usually just the throwing card, playing cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's trying to protect Rogue from getting herself killed there in a fit of rage, and he sends a motorcycle at her. Because that would do less damage than running through a Sentinel would.
It's incredible. I mean, the Sentinel is so menacing too. Like the sound design and stuff, because it'll blast. Just the way it looks is amazing, and it'll shoot blasts, and then like the noises and stuff when it like is shooting at its like cables and shit. The sound design is fantastic. When it blasts Magneto and it says like Omega level threat terminated, then it's like terminated. It like echoes. It's so intimidating and scary. And there's a shot in it that is very like 9/11 reminiscent, where you see like the back of it from above, and it's just like going through the city, and there's just like smoke coming up, and that's straight out of the comic. You know, it's just this like epic, intimidating thing, and you're like, what's going to happen? They're not going to kill Gambit or Rogue, right? I mean, Magneto, it's like, of course, Magneto is going to die because he dies at this part in the comics too.
Yeah.
But did you think that was going to happen with Gambit?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The second, because he charges the Sentinel, and then, although he seems really far away at first, I don't know how he got there that fast.
Yeah.
Little detail I'll happily ignore.
Yeah,
but then
seriously.
you see, the Sentinel has one of those little cables, and it pierces him, and you're like, that's when you're like, oh shit.
Yep.
Like, what are they doing here?
Yes.
I think while I was watching this, I was messaging. I think I said like, oh shit or oh fuck like 3 or 4 times.
Yep.
And I bet you were wondering like what point I was talking about it.
Yep.
Because there's so many moments like that in this episode. But ultimately, Gambit says his classic line here that he's said he said multiple times in the original series. The name's Gambit. Remember it.
Right.
And then he blows up. He charges the Sentinel and blows up, and then we have the aftermath scene in a crater of Rogue holding Gambit, and kind of reminiscent of the second episode for me here, where she's saying, "I can't feel you," just like kind of Storm said, "I can't feel the breeze." I thought that was a nice little connection there, or callback.
Oh, so good. Yeah. When he says the name's Gambit, Mon Ami, remember, because he says the Mon Ami. I thought he just says the name's Gambit, remember it, but he does say Mon Ami.
Yeah.
I don't think Gambit's ever done anything more epic than that in any media, comics included. Yeah.
No, honestly, Gambit's overall importance to X-Men is probably overinflated because of his presence in the cartoon.
Yes.
He's definitely done things, but he's not as prominent throughout the history as many of these other characters are.
Right. Pretty much like every other character that's on the regular roster is bigger than him. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not Jubilee.
I was just about to say maybe not Jubilee, but but all of them.
But yeah.
So yeah, the way that it ended, it's just so perfect. And she says, I can't feel you, sugar, or sugar, I can't feel you. And she's touching him with her bare hand. So it's like he has to be dead because otherwise she'd be like absorbing his power.
Yeah.
You told me the next day, or you sent me an article the next day with Brian DeMayo's article or like the thing you wrote up. Brian DeMayo left the show. Oh, Bo, thank you. You're Brian. Yeah. But Bo DeMeo left the show, and we don't know the circumstances. It's worrisome to me because I don't know if they can make something like this without someone having this specific vision.
I agree. So from what I read from this is that he pitched this whole story and idea in this particular episode back in like November of 2020. And a lot of his things were, he one of the directives he had was that he wanted to show everybody that it was not just about Wolverine. And then he took inspiration from this episode from 9/11, which was near him, and then the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, he was part of that community that was affected by that. And you can feel the trauma through this episode, honestly. And it's really like a beautiful expression of what it's like to experience that, I think.
Yeah. It's crazy because he references 9/11 and he references that shooting. He talks about 9/11, how it was sort of a wake-up call, and he says how the X-Men cartoon is a part of our childhood, and that he found himself either after the shooting or after 9/11 going back to the cartoon because it kind of reminded him of a more innocent time. Yeah. And it's just so great to see someone acknowledge that this shit is not just like, let's just squeeze all the nostalgia out of this to make people watch. Let's actually tell something meaningful. Let's take something personal from our own lives and put it into this story. And God, it makes something that's completely fucking different from like 98% of the stuff that's been on Disney Plus.
Yeah, this show, this episode proves that this is not just a cash grab, a nostalgia cash grab. This is someone with a vision, had wanted to express this, and they just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, so good. I don't know if we're gonna get anything that's like at least along the same lines or even like coming close to this episode.
Well,
go ahead.
Bo himself said that this is just a warm up, and that the finale, the 3-part finale, is the big move.
Jesus Christ!
So I don't know how they're gonna top this, man.
I mean, how can you? Like, what the fuck?
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, yeah, I think honestly, we could keep talking for hours about this, but I think that's a good place. Is there anything else you want to say about this episode right now?
Yeah, I just want to talk about, I said before that there's 5 episodes left. Next week, so we get 2 episodes and then a 3-part finale. So next week is the episode title is Life Death Part 2.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that is mainly going to be a Storm-centric episode there, and I'm wondering if they're going to make us wait to see any of the fallout of this. Like, if they're going to address this at all next episode, or are we just going to see that stuff with Storm, which would be cruel.
It would be, yes. But I do think that is actually going to happen. I do think it's going to just be the Forge and Storm stuff. Yeah. But we know that like Captain America is going to show up at some point, or at least someone with his shield is going to show up.
Yes, we saw that from the mid-season trailer. Like you said before, there was a bunch of scenes we've already seen, and then a couple little things with foreshadowing. And one of them is that shield. I really want to make a point to rewatch that episode that Captain America was in from the original series, but I think was in season 5.
Yeah.
I haven't advanced any time in my rewatch of the original series. I'm still right before Dark Phoenix. So
okay. Yeah. Just it's really great to be fucking watching Disney Plus and have this show right now. I'm super excited about the remaining episodes of this show. I don't know how they'll keep momentum going with Bo DeMeo gone, but on his Twitter, he kind of went like dark on social media after he left. He's back on Twitter, and it says showrunner of X-Men 97. I don't know. Maybe he's coming back. I would just cross my fingers.
Like you said, we don't know what the circumstances were about the parting of ways there. Yeah. But I hope this, if he wants to come back, I hope that this facilitates him coming back, because this is fantastic. I love that he has a vision. I love that this is so good because of him and the other people involved. He called out the director too, I believe, as helping him visualize a lot of the scenes here and elevating them from what he had originally pitched.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, if anyone that's even remotely connected to Disney Plus is watching I kind of doubt it. But if you are, make more shit like this, okay?
Yes, please.
Less fucking Moon Knight and more of this, okay? So anyway, that's me and Brian. We'll be back to see what happens with the X-Men next week. Make sure that you subscribe to Comic Books Transformed. You could leave some comments about this episode besides John Edwards. Some other people can too. But John, we want to hear what you thought too. We love you guys.